Well, if you're my ex-wife, you might emphasize the first syllable, but that's correct. You'd probably spell it with two S's instead of one as well. So, yeah, Asplund is fine. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. All right. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees on in listen-only mode. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last session of our first day of the 60-year anniversary virtual Secure360. So today we've got Grant asking some checkpoints. We've been talking about protecting you from you. If you do have questions, please enter them on the poll, and the moderators, Mike Johnson and myself, will pose those back to Grant. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Grant. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone, for joining. I really appreciate you being here. I'm not going to waste a lot of time. We're not going to talk about Infinity, but I do want to make sure everyone's well aware of the breadth that Checkpoint offers. It's a pretty broad portfolio we call Infinity. Today, we're really going to be talking about protecting you from you. You know, everything is software defined. And so in so far as everything is software defined, we need new tools for this new world. And I'm going to run through that with you today, give you some things to think about. I like to have fun. I like to have some good imagery if we've got the time at the end. I'll also try to maybe give you a demonstration of some of the things that I highlight throughout the presentation. Now, I'm going to talk also about some assets, some resources, some ebooks, some guides, some reports. Any of these that you're interested in receiving a copy of, please send me an email. I'll have my email posted at the end of the presentation, and I'll be happy to provide them for you. So I don't suspect I need to belabor this point too much. We all have we hear about it all the time. We're constantly hearing growth of the cloud, growth of the cloud, growth of the cloud. It is pretty remarkable. I do believe it is where we're going. I sat on a panel in Tremblant outside of Montreal. It was an IDC panel. This was last year, and I loved what the analyst said, the moderator. He said, you know, we're all going to be moving to the cloud. It's just going to take 40 or 50 years. And so I think that's an accurate statement. I think there's also a lot of confusion around the cloud. You know, I mean, you've probably seen it. If you've ever looked at the Starbucks menu, they actually have a cloud macchiato, if you can believe that. Or a local mattress store in my area of the country. The commercial is, come on in and get your own private cloud. I mean, the point is this word cloud is seeping into our vernacular. Everybody is hearing about it. Great deal of confusion about it. But for all of us, there's an important thing I want you to remember. And it's, despite this crazy, unprecedented growth that we continue to see in the cloud, what you need to remember is that in 2018, at least, it represented less than 5% of the total IT spend. 5%. So the moral of this story, and I love how Matt Assay, the author, kind of spun this story, because he said, you know, we need to do a better job really showing, demonstrating, unshackling our customers and really demonstrating and showing how they can make use of this exciting environment, because it really is remarkable. Now, I'm going to pause and just ask, how many of you have one of these powering everything you have 24/7, 365? I'll bet not. And it is obvious, right? I mean, plug and use and pay for what you consume. I mean, we're seeing a lot of things flip this switch to the service-based world. And this is just one more example. But I want to make sure you also appreciate, while it's just subtle and nuanced, it can be significant. For the last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, however long it's been, you have been the captain of your own ship, right? You've been the one that it chooses which port to drop anchor, what to put in the cupboards, what weight of oil to put into the engine. I mean, you really, truly are the captain of your own ship. And when we move into the public cloud and we start to use public cloud services, it is a slightly different craft. Now, I put these 2 images up because I think it really highlights that, the fact is that ship that you've been the captain of, you have to build and install another bedroom, where this one, you can spin up as many as you want on a fly. And so it's the scalability that really is unbelievable. And it's something you have to deal with. And what I always remind people is, just because you've been the captain of your own ship, and mind you, the data centers that Amazon and Google and Microsoft are building are so far superior to that of anything we build, I'm telling you. So you have to understand, they're building it for Fortune 1 and Fortune 1 million. And there are a lot of things that you're maybe not intimately familiar with. And so just because you've been qualified to get into the bridge of that ship that you've been the captain of, you may not be fully qualified to get into the ship here, certainly not without some help. So there are many things that, frankly, you just won't see at all. Now, I suspect there are many of you on this webinar currently that recall when we made that massive transformation to virtualization, right? I mean, we were running 8 to 15% utilization, and thank you, Stanford. We've got virtualization and VMware, and all of a sudden now we're running at a much higher percent of utilization. Everybody's much happier. But we had this stuff called sprawl, right? And we had new challenges in that environment despite the new capabilities. Well, ladies and gentlemen, to quote the famous and late and great Yogi Berra, it is deja vu all over again, only exacerbated. Because if you thought sprawl and drift was bad when it was in your own data center, just imagine it now being in a data center that anyone can get to from anywhere if they have the appropriate credentials. It's really a new world. Now, the other thing, if you think about that, you're just not going to see, is what we love about the cloud. This elastic, ephemeral, breathing kind of heave up, contract down capability called the cloud. It's awesome. And certainly, you're not going to see that in your own data center where 50 new machines get racked and then disappear, right? But it is the beauty of the cloud. But with it comes challenges. Now, the other thing you have to think about when you think about compliance and enforcing compliance in those kinds of environments, I kind of do the analogy of, having a meal is, hey, it's breakfast, and a couple of boxes of cereal are on the table and you're ready to go. In this new environment, the capability to scale unprecedentedly fast and then contract back down, to have this type of requirement to enforce compliance uniformly and effectively across all these workloads, across all your assets, everywhere, this can be also a new challenge. Now, this is one of the reports I mentioned earlier that I have available. This is from the cybersecurity insiders. And what this is they've got some 600,000 constituents, and they did a cloud security report based on a survey of their constituents. And you can size this up and compare to how it compares to you. Are you using a single one and only cloud, or are you using a hybrid or multi-cloud environment? This is the data, and it shows, and our data shows the same thing, that far and away the expectation as we continue, especially on this maturity journey, more and more people are going to be using multi and hybrid cloud environments because, certainly so many people have an existing environment that they want to migrate over into the cloud. It's not just an all or nothing game. So what are the operational challenges that you can expect to face or are facing? See if this lines up with you and your data. Compliance is a real bugger in the cloud, and it largely is because of the drift that's so easy, the fact that you can have this constantly moving, changing environment that requires you to be constantly adjusting and monitoring and enforcing your compliance policies. So it really is a new world. My horrible analogy maybe is, it's like maintaining compliance in a public cloud is like being in a one-man sailboat in a windstorm. You really have got to constantly be looking and adjusting to where you're going and adjusting so that you can go in the right direction. And that's certainly true with regards to enforcing compliance. A close second is just being able to see. Doesn't this sound familiar? You'll remember visibility was a big issue back when virtualization came about. And we all know, because we're all security practitioners, that the literal starting point for the ability to control, to secure anything is you have to be able to see it. You have to have visibility. It's absolutely essential. Now, I've kind of alluded to this already, but another analogy, when you look at the differences, and what I'm trying to highlight for you, ladies and gentlemen, is that there can be things that are the same that are drastically different or have nuanced differences. So, for example, it's safe to say both of these are places to go swimming. I think everyone would agree. But the one on the left, you may be concerned about pH or chlorine level, or if the water level is too low, you have to get the hose and manually fill it up yourself. The one on the right, constantly being fed with new water, so it's constantly changing, and you may be more worried about whether or not there's something in there that's going to bite you or eat you rather than the chlorine level. But there's still both places to go swimming. And those are drastic differences, I understand, but there are some pretty drastic differences between the cloud and your data center, but there are also some really subtle nuances, and frankly, it's the nuances that'll end up really getting you. Because you see, so many people are trying to leverage and use what they have on-prem and take it into the cloud, and in part, I think it's because we've been told to, hey, just lift and shift. Come on up. If you've got it virtualized, just move it up to the cloud. We've been fed this line that it's easy and simple to just move it up into the cloud. And you would then expect that, okay, if I used it on-prem, I'm going to be able to use it up in the cloud. And the data shows something quite different. While you have some limited capabilities, some functionality here and there, the traditional tools really just don't work, and most have some sort of limitation or limited functionality. And you really need, just like we went through with virtualization, and while we had new capabilities and we couldn't abandon anything we had done, we needed to acquire new skills, new tools, to to deal with this environment. Well, we're doing it all over again. Now, are we really exposed in the cloud? You know, people ask that, and so I've inserted these slides just to give you some interesting data to try to really highlight the difference between me having to get your card key or get past the receptionist and somehow get into the building and then get into the data center, right? All of those things, that none of them are required in the cloud. So is it really that dangerous? Well, what we did is we stood up a public cloud account. And we had nothing in it, but we did put a honeypot because we wanted to find out what's going to happen. I mean, does anybody really care? Take a guess what we saw in just 15 minutes. You know, as it says here, Houston, we have a problem. And why? It's because it's so easy. It's right there. You know, it's just accessible. And so many people make so many mistakes in the cloud, and it gets them. Now, who wants to guess how many in the first 7 days? Nearly 4 million various attempts. 4 million. I mean, that's crazy, but it just goes to show that when you stand up a public cloud account, other people know about it. They're checking you out. They're poking, they're pushing, they're rattling the door handle. Now, I want to give you another example of something that we all need to strive to eradicate as best we can from our organization. And it's not MongoDB. It's stupid. and this is an example because it does happen. Now, a lot of organizations use MongoDB. It's very popular. And some of you, maybe many of you, are very familiar with this website, Shodan. So in an effort to build a presentation previously with a past colleague, a brilliant woman, Shira Shamban. Shira, I love you. You're the best. She's really terrific, brilliant cyber security lady. We were working on this together, and we wanted to find out how many instances of MongoDB are we going to see out there in the wild, and then how many are doing something stupid. So first, we found more than 60,000 instances. But the stupid is using either the default or no password. Over 23,000, you can see. I mean, this is something that really is a problem. Because if we're not paying attention, we are going to get hacked. If we're not putting the proper tools in place, if we're not using the proper tools, if we're not enforcing the proper policies, we're going to be in trouble. And first and foremost, as I've mentioned previously, is you got to have the tools to be able to see it if it's happening. Of course, the most important thing to do is stop it, right? That's kind of a mantra for anybody that knows Checkpoint. That's what frankly, that's really what we're all about. We're about stopping it before it gets in. Detection's overrated. Which leads me to the pressures that the cloud is really pushing on. Please forgive this statistic. I meant to edit it and I didn't. This should read at least 99% through 2023. And this is really, really important to hear and understand. This is the whole misunderstanding and confusion around the shared responsibility model. And as a result, it's that coupled with the fact that everything is software, which means everything that you are now controlling, or most everything, that's in the public cloud, you're doing through the use of APIs, right? All the tools are using APIs. In fact, I'm going to encourage you to look for tools that use APIs, the native APIs from the cloud providers, and expose APIs themselves. I caution you to go down the agent path. That's not what I would suggest is necessarily a good strategy. You have to choose what's best for you. But the fact of the matter is, and we hear about it all the time, we make mistakes. People are making mistakes, and the bad guys are out there easily accessing and scanning those cloud environments and finding those vulnerabilities. Now, I've said it several times, but I want to stress it again. It is subtleties and nuances that are abundant. It is that we're now in this world of configuration tables and boxes and check boxes, and that's different and requires a little bit of caution. I always like to ask, how many of you remember RTFM? I'll tell you, the M is manual. The F, well, we'll say fine, right? But no one reads the fine manual anymore because there aren't manuals. We undo. And this actually creates more pressures. Did you know that in AWS alone, there's a couple of hundred capabilities, functions that have no undo? Uh-oh. So it's a new world. And, you know, things are complex. This complexity that we saw crawling and growing and expanding on-prem, now when you integrate the cloud and you look at people federating authentication, and we're trying to make it simpler for users, and so we're doing more implementation where we're hopping from one site to another, and all of this is really causing more challenges for our security teams. Now, I mentioned this before, but it is so true. The propensity, I mean, look at, hey, Jane, will you give me your card key so I can get into the data center over the weekend? I got a project I got to work on. No, Jane won't. I mean, I wouldn't either. But, hey, Jane, give me your username and password for the cloud account. I just got to get some stuff done, and then I'll clean it all up, I promise. I'll delete everything. Fewer footprints, right? And fewer fingerprints, maybe. It's certainly much more likely. Furthermore, as legitimate users grow their implementations and use it more, we have to make sure we're really diligent about cleaning up and deleting and all of the things that require new tools in the cloud. Now, we've got new attack services. Certainly, you know, we've got the control plane. We've got the identity now that is a new one. All these APIs that everybody is using. The fact that we may, in fact, be implementing HA or a DR strategy that goes from one to another cloud provider altogether. We're starting to put our jewels, our keys to the kingdom in repositories, and old habits die hard, and they can have severe consequences, like, you know, just including that password in the code. I mean, little things, opening up port 22, things that we've not felt were really that dangerous, really can be. And what complicates the challenges for our IT departments and our security teams is the tools to specifically address cloud native are immature, they're young, they're evolving, and cloud native is smoking. Right? I mean, it's just screaming in terms of its new advancements with things like containers and functions. All of this just makes it much more challenging for all of us to really get the right tools and to protect ourselves from ourselves in these new environments. Now, this one, I'll bet everyone has heard of and maybe even knows of at least one company this has happened to, where they have storage, whether it's blob or S3, that's up in the cloud and it's unencrypted. And for whatever reason, it is then exposed and available to the internet. And where before maybe the exposure was contained within the company or the data center, now we know that exposure is global. And we're seeing improvements, right? Many cloud providers now are defaulting to encrypted as opposed to defaulting to unencrypted. But these are the little subtleties we have to look for and we have to remember we check out. Now, I mentioned earlier that the cloud providers are building phenomenal data centers with unprecedented efficiencies in keeping things patched and maintained and secured. But you still have that responsibility too, right? I always tell people it's in and of. Of is what Amazon, Microsoft, Google are responsible for. They're responsible for the environment, of the environment, okay? You're responsible for what's in the environment. So that means that you've got to be looking at all the CVEs. You've got to be making sure everything is patched. You've got to be making sure that everything is updated as well on all the things that are in that environment. And in this hyper-connected world where people are federating and doing all kinds of other things, now that kill chain, the potential is that much greater, and we have to make sure we're keeping an eye on all of it, because it will introduce more of these cloud-native attacks that are exploiting some function somewhere, in this instance, server-side compromise. But you can see that this is where, as we start to get so hyper-connected, it's going to be more and more and more difficult. And what we need is we need the effective and proper tools to absolutely see and then subsequently enforce policies and controls and security on our environment. It's absolutely critical. Because the fact is, these cloud environments, it says here, cloud networks are vulnerable. I would say that they're vulnerable because of people, because of human beings, and largely because this shared responsibility is so misunderstood. I mean, I've actually, been speaking, and I'll say to the audience, hey, show of hands, and I know everybody hates that. In this virtual world, we don't have to worry about it. But it's, how many of you are using the cloud? And a few hands will go up. And then I'll say, hey, how many of you have a LinkedIn or Facebook account? And everybody's hands go up. And there's the confusion, right? It seems so obvious, but it really still is very, very misunderstood. One of the things that I mentioned is more and more sophisticated and complex attacks, but now we have this lateral spread that also introduces concerns, things we have to keep an eye for. Now my identity is so important. I've got to worry about people stealing my identity or hijacking my accounts, and all the while the tools are immature, they're inconsistent, and trying to use the traditional tools oftentimes really leave us wanting. Now, the good news is the cloud providers are getting much better, and it's because they all understand you need to have confidence and assurance that you're safe and secure. And so you're seeing more and more offerings where they're reducing risk or offering to at least have a reduced perceived risk. And you're going to continue to see more and more security services coming from the cloud providers. And make no mistake about it, The security services that are offered from Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are brilliant. They're different. And this is something I'll just take a moment and stress. Because everything's moved to this world of APIs, because that's how we are now interacting with the cloud providers, and because no two cloud providers are making the APIs available exactly the same, it's lumpy, right? And the other thing that'll complicate it is there are sacred cows within some of the public cloud organizations where there aren't any in others. Case in point, some cloud providers have something called Office and Active Directory, while other cloud providers don't. So identity and access management capabilities and implementations are different for those two cloud providers, for example. So it is this lumpiness that creates a challenge for you because of the inconsistency in terms of delivering capabilities and services in the public cloud from what you're used to on-premise. In fact, the data shows you've been used to some 26 or near 30 different security services on-prem, and in the cloud, it's very lumpy from, the high double-digit, like 18, 19, 20 services, but can be as low as only 8 or 10. And so going from the on-premise into the cloud, everything being API-based, and then trying to do the exact same thing you've been used to doing, it's very difficult. And it's not going to be the same. And so this is why you need tools that can homogenize, that can unify, that can equalize the enforcement and view of your cloud environments. Now, lots of exciting, lots of cool innovation happening in security services, and in particular around cloud security services. And there's no question the evolution of this is really fast, in part because it has to be, because, think about something like containers. I'll talk about in a bit, but, while the technology's been around for a while, nobody was using them 5 years ago, and now virtually a third, a half of every cloud account is using containers. So it's like unbelievable how fast things are moving, and this is requiring innovation from the security vendors, because the bad guys are constantly evolving how they're leveraging these new technologies to get you. And again, we need to look for tools that can unify, homogenize, bring a consistency across our environment. That is what really will make it much simpler, easier, and keep you in the 1%. There's terrific APIs available. You have to have the tools that take advantage of them. And also, I'll caution you, look for companies that are really committed and exposing their own APIs and are putting cloud first in their architecture and everything that they're doing. So let's talk about a few trends, and I'm going to do a time check here just to make sure I know where I'm at. One we're hearing all the time, and boy, this is so true, is this shift left mentality for security, and in particular moving into a CI/CD pipeline, getting out of the waterfall architecture and strategy that we've used, and understanding that we need to be punching down security every single step of the way and not waiting until the end. Now, the other thing I like to point out on this slide is a significant trend in terms of microsegmentation. In fact, I would argue it's a requirement in the cloud. But microsegmentation, my poor man's, simple man's way of explaining it is, imagine having a piece of rope 200 feet long. And if there's anything that goes wrong with that 200 feet of rope, you need to replace the entire 200 feet. Microsegmentation, you take that same 200 feet of rope, but it's in 1 foot sections that automatically connect and disconnect from one another. Now, if there's a problem somewhere within that 200 feet, you go to that 1 foot, take it out, put in a new one, voila. And this is really what microsegmentation gives you the capability of doing. To isolate in very small little chunks, it's very, very efficient. Another real amazing and exciting trend is this whole idea of no longer monitoring and maintaining a server on and on and on and kind of keeping it going, but literally in this hyper dynamic world, it's you schedule a tear down, rebuild, right? Rebuild it, now tear the first one down and come online with the backup, and you have that scheduled on a regular basis because we can. And so it's looking at this environment completely differently, but it allows just some really, really exciting new capabilities. All right. You will not be able to realize all the benefits of the cloud if you don't also implement automation and remediate your responses whenever possible. Now, in fact, there's a paper from Gartner that came out a couple of months ago where they're suggesting you can actually build a more secure data center than the one you've had in the past, using public cloud and using the right tools to homogenize, to unify, and to give you a single tool or single pane of glass, I should say, to be able to have visibility into your cloud environments. Now, this automation and ability to automate remediation, there's some really cool tools, but here again, right, it introduces new challenges, and so you have to make sure you get it right. Right, as the example where if it's in the hands of a coder and there's a boo-boo, it can have a significant service impact. And the fact is, you want to try not to do that, obviously. But the orchestration and the ability to automate our responses is in early stages. But I'm going to encourage you to take a look at a project called CloudBots. That's cloudbots.io. This is an open source project, and there are, tons of bots available for you to use. This is an open source project that is curated by Dome 9, by Checkpoint Dome 9, but I think you'll really be impressed. Supports all 3 of the main cloud providers, and what you could do is go in and get these bots and implement them really, really quickly. It's very, very slick. So you can automate, for example, if you have a policy that says every single storage should have a tag with a value of X, you can implement that and have it actually go and take that action. All storage must be encrypted, and so on. So it's a very, very cool project, a very cool technology. I encourage you to take a look at it. All right, the last one I'd mentioned already, containers. It's growing like crazy, and it's because it just makes so much sense. If any of you have had Legos, you'll understand the premise and why containers make so much sense. Everything's there, it's measured and fits perfectly together. It's really, I had one guy tell me it's like an egg. It's all just self-contained, ready to go. Everything's inside. It's really a exciting technology, and so I encourage you, if you haven't, start looking into it, try it, right? As Mark Twain said, the best way to get ahead is to get started. So what controls when adopting public cloud? As you would guess, encryption at rest. As I mentioned, we're seeing many more defaulting to encryption at rest. Automating compliance. And, this is important to appreciate. This has to be a continuous compliance, not just automating it once and say, okay, it's good, because you'll get blown off course in a heartbeat. And then, as I've been talking about, exposure of APIs is critical for your vendors. You got to make sure that you're leveraging those APIs. Those APIs are getting exposed, and there's the tools for reporting and all of the things that you need. Now, the thing that everybody does it, but everybody does it differently, and that's their rules and enforcement for compliance. And if I have time, I'm going to show you a really, really exciting capability where you can customize, anybody can customize their compliance rules. It's really awesome. It's called GSL. The other thing, we have to get out of silos. We have to start to integrate these tools into our ticketing systems to help our workflow, obviously, and then integrate with the existing investments I've made in scanners and various security tools. So when you look, I'll just fill these out because I want to make sure everybody understands. You have to protect everything, from workloads to functions and everything in between. All your assets have to be protected, and everything that we've done in the past, we have to continue to do, right? I mean, you can't abandon any of our past disciplines. In fact, I would suggest there's new ones now. And one of the important ones is that we need to turn that corner on enabling our developers to make hay with this environment, but do it in a safe and secure manner. There's lots of really exciting tools that we're seeing come out in that particular arena, especially. So it's early, but this is something that we need to do, because this is where we can move at the speed of cloud. When we really, truly implement DevOps, DevSecOps, and that true CI/CD pipeline. Everything needs to be secured, and what I encourage you to look for are tools that can homogenize and unify your enforcement across all of your environments, both on-prem and cloud, public, private. This is really, really important. And then make sure the native APIs that are being made available from the vendors are what's getting leveraged. Make sure your vendor is exposing and making available all of the APIs you need, and have a strategy and a plan to give you more APIs and to continue in that path. Okay, I mentioned these resources. This is another one. This is a terrific ebook. I'm happy to provide. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but this was something we put together with AWS, Amazon, and it really is what I had mentioned previously. You're in a one-man sailboat in a windstorm, so it's setting your rules and your policies and your framework and constantly checking and verifying and adjusting. Happy to provide that for anyone that would like a copy. Get started on containers. I mean, it's really very simple. Like the cloud, it's virtually free, and it's I recommended you just pick an app that's, not connected to much and just go give it a try. This is an exciting technology that I predict will really explode in the next few years. There is a wonderful blueprint we call our 2.0 blueprint. And I want to also make that available because the fact is we need the details to understand things like microsegmentation, how to really avoid the east-west threats that are so pervasive, because this attack surface is broad, it is complex. Consider cloud native anytime and every time you can. And listen, there is an abundance of free or near free training available from Amazon, from Microsoft, from Google. Go just do a search and use it. I mean, you might have to put up with a little bit of the animated cartoons and the Alexa voice, but I'm telling you, it's really, really good, because there is a difference between an F5 load balancer that your engineers have been working with and an ELB, despite it being a load balancer, okay? So if you don't have the resources, if you don't have the expertise, find it, buy it, train it, hire it. Just make sure that you have the expertise or the assistance as you step into the bridge of that new ship. Because I'm telling you, the bad guys are out there. They're tough. Now, this I was alluding to. I'm not going to go through each one of these. I do have this available. I am more than happy to also provide it for you. It's a great resource, but it really breaks down and explains all of the things you need to think about as you move into and you're using public cloud. So with that, I want to thank you all very, very much. I'd like to, if it's okay with you, switch over and see if I can pull up CloudGuard Dome 9. So this is the posture management solution from Checkpoint Software. We got a little bandwidth battle, I'm sure, going on. Time to abandon. I'll come back and I'll see if there's any questions. And I can, as I'm waiting, I can answer questions and try to see if I can get Dome 9 back up. Okay, I'll take a look. I did, obviously, you can see for those of you that I made it in. So this is the preview new dashboard that we're building with CloudGuard Dome 9. You can see it's just a lot of really rich information with these little widgets that I can move around. For those of you that have seen the previous version, this might be a more familiar view for you. But here you can see we can support Amazon, AWS, Azure, Google, or Kubernetes. And we give you that single view of all your assets. We give you a quick snapshot on your level of compliance and where you're out of compliance. It's really rich. What I want to take a few minutes and show you in particular is something called the GSL. Now, you can see this is a very rich product with lots of capabilities covering serverless, and Logic is our threat hunting tool. I'm going to go into the posture management because I want to show you how powerful, how simple it is to create a custom compliance rule and then check your environment to find out if you're compliant or not. So it's what we call the GSL builder. Now, GSL is governance specific language, and it's a scripting language that runs throughout the entire product. In fact, it's the same scripting language that we use in Logic. So we talked earlier, one of the most common threats, or common mistakes, I should say, is we leave storage unencrypted. So let me show you how simple it is to write a compliance rule to check your environment if your S3 buckets are encrypted. All you do is you point at S3 and say, S3 should have encryption. Close the scope, and now I can select my environment on what I want to run it against. I'll run it against my production environment, and I run test. And the results will come back, and I suspect we're in good shape. But let's just say we want to customize our rule. We want every S3 bucket to not only have encryption, but it also should have a tag. Let's make a tag with a value that equals 33. Close the scope, and now test it. And obviously, I failed all because that was on the fly. But look at that. That fast, that simple. And oh, by the way, you'll notice over here, here's the context for all of that rule that I was writing. It gives you a preview. So really, really powerful. Oh, I made a mistake. I didn't want a tag with a value of 33. I can go ahead and remove. It's that simple. So what this gives you the capability of doing is going into any one of the dozens and dozens, hundreds of compliance rules that we already have, whether it's NIST or HIPAA or PCI, and now you can modify it. You can customize it just for you, just for your environment, just for the way you want your compliance rules enforced. It's really, really powerful. So with that, I'm done. I'm going to switch back. Here's my email address for any of you that would like to receive a copy of the assets that I spoke about, the cloud security report from Cybersecurity Insiders, the compliance ebook from Amazon and Checkpoint, or the Cloud Security Blueprint 2.0, just send me an email. I'll send it out to you, no problem. And with that, I really thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, but we do have a question.
Okay.